Everyone keeps asking if Marathon is going to be the next big extraction shooter. That's the wrong question. Here's what you should be asking. Who is Marathon for? Because depending on what you're expecting, there's a real chance that you're going to be disappointed. It's not Destiny, it's not Tarkov with just better graphics. So this video is being honest about that. Marathon isn't trying to win over every type of player, and honestly, that's not a bad thing. The game director said they know the game isn't for everyone. But you know what happens to most live service games? They fail because they promise too much to too many people, and then they disappoint everyone. A game made for everyone is a game made for no one. So instead of hype, this video is about filtering. It's about being realistic. If you're in the right audience, Marathon might click immediately, but if you're not, I think the game is going to feel frustrating no matter how polished it is. In fact, I'm making this video as a self-reflection almost. I do not love extraction shooters. They've never really been my cup of tea. I have a full-time job, a life, and when I play games, I don't want my session to be 75% what gear am I going to load into this instance with and then lose that gear. But on the other side, I do have a soft spot for Bungie games, from the OG Marathon and Pathways in the Darkness before that, to their Halo games, Destiny 1. So I will be giving this game a try on the free weekend when that gets announced, and I'm going to go in with an open mind. I'll give it a shot, but I have no idea if this game will click with me. So I'm putting these thoughts down on paper and then into video form to kind of get everything in order. But with all that said, let's actually get into the video. Before we dive into who Marathon is for, we need to talk about the massive elephant in the room, Arc Raiders. When Marathon was first revealed back in 2023, it looked like Bungie was going to own the extraction shooter space. Later, Arc Raiders came along and just absolutely stole Marathon's thunder. And since its release, Arc Raiders launched to over 270,000 concurrent players on Steam. It's gotten an overwhelmingly positive reception. While on the other hand, Marathon went through the stolen art debacle, the alpha went poorly, and really there was Arc Raiders not really having to do anything because of all the negativity that Bungie and Marathon were getting. So Marathon isn't just competing with Tarkov anymore, it's competing with a game that's already proven extraction shooters can be accessible and successful. A game that solved a lot of the problems that Marathon still seems to be working through, a game that didn't launch with the baggage that Marathon has. So the question isn't just who is Marathon for now, it's why should I play Marathon instead of Arc Raiders? And I think that's a much harder question to answer. Now, to Bungie's credit, they're clearly paying attention. The new Rook Runner shell, that's obviously based on other games' free loadout system. Improved AI enemies. I think that Arc Raiders showed how important deadly PvE can be. Proximity chat. Arc proved that it could work without devolving into pure toxicity, something that Bungie and Sony was probably terrified of. But honestly, is borrowing successful features from your competitor enough, or does Marathon need to be better than Arc to justify its existence? And really, while we talk about them being competitors, I don't know if I can really classify them as that. With Arc being a third-person, big sprawling maps, what really feels like a non-focus on the PvP side, at least from my point of view, and Marathon as a first-person shooter and feeling way more PvP-oriented, it just feels like they're separate audiences. But we're gonna find out soon enough. Let's look at another obvious comparison. Tarkov. If you love Tarkov because death is brutal and gear loss is just unforgiving, there can be gaps in player knowledge of the game, and it's one of those that it refuses to hold your hand, then I think Marathon is probably going to feel too easy to you if you like all those things. Maybe it doesn't feel like there's enough risk, not enough tension in the moment-to-moment gameplay. Tarkov does feel brutal and punishing, and I think that's a large part of the reason why people play it. I think that adrenaline rush that you get when you hear footsteps, that's the point of that game. And I'm not sure that Marathon will give you that same rush, and that's not bad. It's just different. Different game design, different philosophies. I think Tarkov just throws you to the wolves, where Bungie wants to do more in terms of setting up players to quote-unquote understand the game. Now, maybe that's exactly what the genre needs. Maybe Tarkov's gatekeeping is why extraction shooters haven't gone truly mainstream yet. Think about it. How many of your friends have tried Tarkov and given up? Or how many have never even tried because the learning curve was just too steep? And when I say accessibility, I don't mean that the game is dumbed down. More so, I just mean that more people can actually learn the game before they quit because of frustration. And I think that would actually turn off some of the Tarkov purists. In fact, I'm not sure there will be a ton of crossover in terms of the player base between these two games just because they truly do seem like polar opposites of the same genre. But Bungie, to me, is betting that there's a massive audience of people who want to like extraction shooters but can't really handle Tarkov's brutality. People who will quit after losing their third loadout in a row. But are there enough people to sustain a $40 live service game that comes with the history that Marathon has? I'm not sure. And if you're a Destiny player, I think that this is where expectations start to get really dangerous. Obviously, Destiny players probably love Bungie's gunplay, the movement, build crafting, loadout identity, and I do think that Marathon has a lot of crossover with that. But if what you really love about Destiny is power fantasy or being showered in loot and able to load into in-game content even and just run through the PvE enemies, I think Marathon is going to feel rough for you. There's no strike playlist to just relax in. Every time you load into a map, you carry a risk. PvP is always going to be a part of the equation. I do think the PvE enemies seem to have been amped up in terms of difficulty. And honestly, I think most of the PvE content in Destiny can seem trivial at best for most players now. I think the PvP crowd from Destiny won't really have any problems finding enjoyment in the game, but if you're a PvE purist, I'm not so sure this game will be for you either. And I think that those players also value their loot, and to think about losing it, I feel like that would be a huge turnoff to them. But then on the other side, what if losing gear actually makes it mean something again? In Destiny, you get so much loot that it's just thrown aside, dismantled immediately, or thrown into your vault. But what if Marathon's scarcity in gear makes every extraction feel genuinely rewarding? And what if that's the risk that's been missing from Destiny's endgame for a long time? Now, I've seen a lot of Destiny content creators and players on social media. They're just super skeptical. And I think that's because they fall into one of two buckets, PvE and PvP. And Marathon doesn't lend itself really to either. It's a weird middle ground that might not satisfy anyone. And then you get into the seasonal resets, where your vault will get reset. All that loot that you extracted with, it's gone. You start over. Bungie and other games frame this as creating a level playing field and preventing the rich from getting richer. But if you're a Destiny player who has spent thousands of hours building your vault, I think that's going to feel bad for you. Is the gear reset the right call for competitive integrity? Probably, but I think it's also going to turn off a lot of people who just want to keep stuff. Let's talk about the price for a second. Marathon is going to cost $40. That's the same as Arc Raiders, even Helldivers 2. And after what happened with Concord, I think there's a lot of skepticism around paid multiplayer games right now, especially ones with an emphasis on PvP. But extraction shooters have always really been paid. Tarkov, Hunt, I think the entire genre was really built on that buy-to-play model. And I think there's a lot of different reasons, deterring cheaters and stuff like that. But why does it feel different with Marathon? I think it's because we're in a weird moment where players expect live service games to be free. You have Fortnite and Warzone, Apex. So when a new multiplayer comes out and they ask for $40 up front, I think there's a large population that's going to give immediate pushback. Now, it doesn't mean that games aren't successful with a price tag, Arc Raiders and Helldivers 2, but I think they succeeded because they delivered value and also respected your time. Marathon's baking on the same thing. You pay $40, you get the full game, all future updates are free, the reward passes don't expire, eliminating a little bit of that FOMO, and on paper that sounds great. But really you're asking people to pay $40 for a game that might be good in a genre that's already dominated by Arc Raiders while competing for time with free games that people already love. And I think that is a huge, tough sale. And if Marathon launches thin on content, which I think a lot of people are worried about, that $40 price tag is going to seem real steep. Let's switch gears and talk about the casual and solo players. Marathon does include solo queue now. It does include proximity chat. Those are things that signal to me that they now definitely want solo players, which is good because before, well, I would say that there would be even less likely of a chance for me to want to try that game out or others. I'm a pretty big solo gamer most of the time with random playtime and all that, so it would be hard for me to find two other people I not only trust to do well in the game, but who would also want to play in the first place. Again, Bungie changed their stance on the solo player experience. I applaud them for that. In fact, I think that probably boosted their potential population by a pretty significant amount, but time will tell if they retain that boost after players get a taste of the gameplay and the sandbox. The addition of Rook is a great move that other games have as well. You bring nothing in with that character, so you're going to lose nothing if you die, so it's a free scavenge run. And I think that's perfect for casual players who have 20 minutes before dinner. There's no stress, no commitment, just in and out. But I also push back on myself while thinking about this and ask myself, will solo queue be full of characters that just pop the invis? Probably. And will that be fun for other players to go up against? Probably not. And I do think that at the end of the day, extraction shooters are still extraction shooters. If you have only short play sessions, you hate losing progress in gear, you don't enjoy the tension, Marathon's going to feel exhausting, unrewarding, and probably unfun. But I do think that Bungie is trying to meet casual players a little bit halfway, instead of just telling them to leave the game. But to be honest, I'm not sure that meeting those players halfway is even worth it, because if you are truly a casual and you just want to chill after work, I don't think that this game is probably for you still. Like, is a casual, friendly extraction shooter really even possible? And I know people would say that Ark is casual friendly, and to an extent I can understand. But again, I feel like Marathon and Ark are actually pretty different. But here is what worries me the most about Marathon, and that's content and the lack of it at launch. It's going to launch with 4 different maps, 3 taking place on the surface, and then 1 on the Marathon ship itself. So there's 4 maps. I'm 99% sure they said that there's only going to be 6 runner shells at launch, and that's it. Now Bungie is saying there's going to be free updates with new maps and new shells and seasonal content and the battle pass stuff. But again, launching with what seems like pretty thin content seems pretty risky. And it's not like we haven't seen this before with Bungie, thinking about Destiny 1 and 2. And that was a decade ago, over a decade ago, and players aren't that patient anymore. If Marathon launches with just 4 maps and nothing to chase except faction reputation and vault loot that gets wiped, I think people are going to bounce out of the game fast. The other concern that people have brought up is Bungie's live service track record. Destiny 2 has been a roller coaster of good seasons and terrible ones, content droughts, sunsetting, the whole vaulting of paid content, and Marathon cannot afford to make those mistakes. Not in 2026, and not at a price tag of $40, and not when something like Arc Raiders exists. I do think that they're really betting on their progression systems in that game, and the faction stuff, and that there's a lot more depth than meets the eye. And I want to believe that, but I need to see it first. So who is the game built for? From my point of view, Marathon is going to be best suited for players who like risk, but hate the idea of being punished to the point they just want to log off. I think it's been made for players who've been waiting for an extraction shooter that doesn't actually feel like a second job. Somebody who wants these high stakes without being miserable afterwards. I think it's for the Destiny player who just loves Bungie's gunplay, but might be burned out on power creep and content vaulting and a lack of direction on the PvP side of things with Destiny. I think it's for the person who tried Tarkov and got destroyed by somebody they never even saw and thought that this was just terrible. I think it's made for a solo player who just wants to dip in and out without committing to the game as like a full-time thing and constantly trying to find a 3-man squad for every single session. But again, it's this weird middle ground where Tarkov players will probably find it too forgiving and Destiny players will find it too punishing. And again, is there actually an audience that's large enough in this middle ground to sustain a live service game? And maybe that audience has already been captured by ARC raiders. So to me, Marathon isn't for everyone, and that's okay. But if you've bounced off Tarkov, if you are burned out by Destiny, this might be the first extraction shooter that actually respects your time. I say that with a question mark at the end because we really don't know. Or it could fall into the trap of trying to please too much of that middle ground and satisfying no one. Or it might launch in March and struggle to find an audience and a genre that's getting more crowded as each month goes on. We'll find out soon enough. I'll be there on that free weekend. I'm gonna go in with an open mind, and if you're on the fence, I'd say wait. Get in on that open weekend, see what the reviews say, see what the player count looks like. Because the last thing I think any of us want to do is pay $40 for a multiplayer game that could die within months. Even though I don't think that's what's gonna happen, I definitely don't think this game is dead on arrival or it'll be shut down in a month. But we'll see. That's going to do it for the video, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you enjoyed. If you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe. Leave a like on the video. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. And I will catch you in the next one. Peace!